Hello guys and girls, and welcome back to another episode of Seb Talks Sports, sponsored by Hoopin and Luton, the place to go to for your favourite new and vintage jerseys and apparel from all things basketball. Today I've got an incredible guest on Seb Talks Sports, one of the greatest fly-halves of all time, who enjoyed a career that saw him win the World Cup with the Wallabies in 1991, retire with the world point scoring record after notching 911 in 72 international appearances, and be inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame. It's the all-time Australian number 10 himself, Michael Lynagh. Enjoy. My guest today is one of the greatest fly halves of all time, the vice captain of the Wallabies team that won the 1991 Rugby World Cup, and a World Rugby Hall of Fame inductee. There's really not a lot this man hasn't achieved. It's an absolute honour to welcome Michael Lynagh to Seb Talks Sports. Michael, how are you?
Good, thanks, Seb. You?
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me today.
That's good. No problem. My pleasure, man. Love to have a chat.
Lovely stuff. Let's get into it. Okay, so I want to go right back to the very beginning to start with. What are your earliest memories of rugby, and who was your sporting inspiration growing up?
Rugby was, well, my earliest memory, funnily enough, was probably the Springboks. They played in Brisbane in about 1972, I think. And, I was thinking about 8 or 9 years age. My father took me. It was at the Brisbane Exhibition Ground. I can't remember anything about the game at all. But I do remember the smell of stink bombs and protesters and that sort of thing. So that, while it's not really a memory of rugby, I was at the game. I played football, as in soccer, and rugby league. We lived down the Gold Coast in Australia, in Queensland there. And then my family moved up to Brisbane, and I went to a school that was a rugby school. And so my first sort of real game of rugby was in 1974. So a long time ago now. But and I wasn't particularly interested. It was just something that the school played, and that's what you did in the winter. But my main sport all the way through school was cricket, and that's what I loved to do. And I was more a cricketer than anything else, really. And then I played first 11 cricket, basically when I was 13. So I had 4 years in the first 11 cricket at school. And as I said, that was sort of my main sport. And then rugby, I played under 13 B team, under 14 B team, and then something happened and ended up in the into the first for 3 years after that. So probably what you call a late developer at school. But then the rugby bug clicked, and when I left school in 1981, we leave school around November 81 for the summer, and I was selected in the Australian schoolboys rugby team that toured to America and over here to the UK and Ireland. And I basically never played cricket again because I came back from that tour in late January and was selected in the Queensland men's team, and that was it. We came to London here in about 96. And I was lucky enough to play and get invited to a number of, charity games and Lord Taverners and that sort of thing, and played quite a bit of cricket when I wasn't playing rugby. And that was really enjoyable. I loved it, and played against some of my childhood heroes and all that sort of thing, from England. And so that was a bit of a guilty pleasure. But I guess my sporting heroes when I was growing up in Queensland were more cricket orientated. So I was a big fan of people like Greg Chappell and at the time. And in rugby, not many, because I never really sort of got involved in rugby until around the late 70s. But I suppose people that I was lucky enough to watch and play with, guys like Mark Lone and Paul McLean and Andrew Slack and Brendan Moon, and mainly Queenslanders, but then Mark Ella and these sort of guys that, while I looked up to them while I was at school, I was sort of playing with and against them the year later. So it was, but rugby league played a big role in most Australians on the East Coast at that time. And people like Bobby Fulton and Mick Cronin and Artie Beetson and these guys. These are people you probably never heard of, but back for a young kid in Australia growing up in Brisbane, they were sort of legendary names.
Very, very nice. Very nice. And you just touched on your sort of youth career there, your younger career. So I want to hone in on that a little bit more. So after a stellar youth career at school and Queensland University, you then broke through for the Queensland Reds, where you'd go on to become the team's all-time top scorer, which is a record you still hold to this day. But just 2 years into that journey, you received a call-up for the national team to represent the Wallabies for the very first time. You made your debut on the 9th of June, 1984 against Fiji at inside centre at just 20 years old, winning the match 16-3. So how did it feel to receive that call-up to represent Australia on the international stage for the very first time? And what did it mean to you to play for the Wallabies 72 times?
Yeah, that call-up was an interesting one because it was actually a small tour to Fiji that Australia undertook early on in the season. And, Mark Ella was well and truly established at 10. And I was sort of just arrived on the scene, taken over the Queensland 10 role because Paul McLean had retired at that time. And I was lucky enough to be selected to go to this, I think it was a 3-match tour to Fiji. Michael Hawker, who was the incumbent 12 at the time and a really good player, didn't go on the tour because he was on his honeymoon at that time. So there was a bit of a vacancy at 12, and I basically filled the role of I filled in that position. And I guess my goal kicking really helped in terms of getting me into the team. It gave me an extra arrow really for my bow. So I remember first of all, I selected on the tour, which was a lovely honour, but then getting named, we were in Suva and getting named the week of the test match at number 12 to get your first test, and then receiving the jumper and all that sort of thing, and the build up. And it was an absolute terrible conditions in the game. I mean, it was an absolute mud bath, windy, rainy, wet, hence the score. I think we scored 1 try to 0, but it was still, that was the memory. And it was a lovely occasion, really, to play for that many times, something I never really took for granted. And I look back on it now at 72 caps, back in those days when we were playing 5 and 6 tests a year. Unlike now where they play 14 or 15 or 16 tests a year. You can accumulate 72 pretty quickly if you stay relatively injury-free and in form. So, but back, to get 72 is, it's great. I would have loved more, but I'll take that, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, it was a good innings, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously I don't want to wait any longer. It's time to talk about that magical Rugby World Cup run in 1991. So you made it through the group stage with relative ease, recording victories against Argentina, Western Samoa and Wales. Beat Ireland by a single point in Dublin, which, I mean, just would have broken Irish hearts everywhere in their home stadium. You dispatched rivals New Zealand in the semi-finals 16-6, which meant it all came down to 80 minutes against England at that home stadium of Twickenham in the final. Your 2 penalties and a conversion after Tony Daly's try saw the Wallabies defeat England 12-6 and get their hands on the country's very first Rugby World Cup. So can you describe just how you specifically prepared for that matchup against the host nation in the final? And more importantly, how did it feel to lift the Webb Ellis Cup as vice-captain with your teammates?
How did we prepare? We were, it was quite a long period to be away. And as a team, as you mentioned, we'd beaten Ireland close, and that sort of really tested us and made us sort of realise that we had an extra gear and we were coming into form. And then the semi-final against New Zealand was probably our best performance of the tournament, particularly in the first 40 against them. I think going into the England game, it wasn't so much of, get out and run around and do a lot of training and all that sort of thing. We'd done most of that. And, it was more trying to get a little bit of rest and making sure we were ready. But we were a very sort of closely knit team and had a good sort of environment. But I think the overriding feeling that I had during that week was that, and I think through the team, was that this is an opportunity that's not going to come too much again. And we felt that we were the better team. And I don't mean that in an arrogant or a complacent sort of way. I mean it in a sort of in a way that when you're building something up, you look at the opposition and look at you. England had already been beaten by New Zealand in the tournament. We'd beaten New Zealand the week before. We'd beaten a similar England team in Sydney earlier that year pretty well. We felt fit, picking from a pretty full squad. Injuries weren't too much of a factor. All those sort of things gave you the feeling that you were confident, but then came this, almost fear of letting this opportunity go. Being favourites, we thought we were favourites, and I think the public did as well, and the press and what have you. And we knew we should win this game, but that you just don't want to let that opportunity go. And afterwards, it was that sense of relief that, okay, we've achieved something fantastic together over the last 6 weeks or so, but it would have all meant nothing if we sort of hadn't lived up to our potential in the final. And to be honest, we probably didn't live up to our potential in the final. We were probably a bit paralysed by nerves and what have you, and didn't want to make too many mistakes, of which we made plenty. But it was just that relief that we got there, and it was an opportunity taken as opposed to one being lost.
Absolutely. Okay, so another memorable day for you on the pitch was the 19th of April, 98, Saracens Falcons at Vicarage Road. After making the move to England in 96 to join Saracens, the two clubs spent the majority of that season battling out for the top spot in the Premiership, with this match, of course, being a key turning point. In the dying minutes, you slotted home a drop goal from 40 metres out to edge the Falcons by 2 points and send nearly 20,000 fans at Vicarage Road into raptures. And given that you smashed Wasps by 30 points just a month later to win the Tetley's Bitter Cup final, how special was that season for Sarries as their most memorable in club history today? How did it feel to play a key role on that side?
Yeah, it was great because the first year we came over in 96 and I had a lot of injuries and the team probably didn't play as well as what we were hoping. It was the first year of, professionalism. So we were all trying to work out what that meant. Did it mean turning up at 9 o'clock in the morning and going home at 5? And, what did this all mean? And the second year we were a little bit more prepared and a bit better as a team. And I had a really good year personally, playing most of the games and playing well, as did the team. This Cup semi-final against Newcastle is funny. I think Rob Andrew, who was the 10 against us that day at Saracens for Newcastle, he was also the 10 in the final at Twickenham. He was also, he was also the 10 that in 1995 knocked us out of the World Cup for England with a drop goal. So he's a little bit of, I keep coming across Rob, so I think our honours are probably pretty even. But that drop goal was pretty special because it wasn't called and there was no time left. And it was, I recall that the pass sort of didn't go to where I, was calling or where I was running to. And it sort of wasn't a great, I didn't really know what to do otherwise than pivot and just hit a drop goal from about 45 yards out. And I hit it really well. So it was, it was one of those things off the cuff that I, had I called it and thought about it, I probably would have duffed it. It was one of those things that you're just off the spare of the moment. But having said that, and I know Francois Pinault, who often, was playing with us on that day as well, and he said, Michael, I used to watch you kicking drop goals and practicing place kicking after we'd all finished training. We were sitting in the warmth. And he said, comes the moment, come the time, off the cuff. It wasn't something that was just luck. It had been practice. So that was nice of him to say. But yes, it was true. You sort of practice those things and practice them. And so you have them in the locker, and when you need them, you pull them out, and sometimes they work. But the more you practice with them, the luckier you get, I think Gary Player said. My last game was at Twickenham against Wasp in the Cup final, and that was a truly, truly memorable day. It was a beautiful day, and we played beautiful rugby, and it was just a lovely way for me to go out, as well as Philippe Seller's last game as well. So, and I was asked afterwards, you played so well, you had a great win, it must have been great fun, which it was. Surely you're going to go on next year. And I said, no, that's exactly the reason why it's time to finish. It's go out on your own terms and with a great memory like that. So, and I was lucky enough to do that.
Fantastic. Okay, so I want to quickly shift to Off the Pitch quickly. So in 2015, you released your autobiography entitled Blindside, which of course everyone should check out. I'll make sure to put it in the link in the description afterwards. Half of that book was dedicated to your life after rugby and centered around one notable incident in 2012. In April of that year, you suffered a life-threatening stroke that saw you lay partially blinded in intensive care at the Royal Brisbane Hospital with your wife and 3 boys on the other side of the world. And since then, you've done incredible work to raise both money and awareness for the Stroke Association, and you even ran the London Marathon just a year after the incident in 2013. So just how important is heightened awareness of the condition, and how has that experience changed your life over the last 10 years?
Yeah, when I had the stroke, I didn't know much about it at all. And I just thought, like probably a lot of people still do, that it was something that, older smokers, overweight sort of people, a stroke is what they have. I'm not sort of somebody who was 48 years of age and in reasonable health, but how wrong I was. And since then, I've learned a lot about stroke, and it can happen to anyone at any age at any time. And it's quite a serious thing in our society that, can be minimised. And if made aware of, people can deal with it if they see it quickly and speedily, and hopefully minimise any lasting effects. So how's it changed my life? I get asked that a lot, and I've thought about the answer a lot, because most of the time you hear people say, live every moment, I'm so grateful and all this sort of thing. And that's very true. But before I had the stroke, I was also very grateful for the life I had led and was leading. And I didn't take that for granted at all. I didn't need a stroke to tell me that I'd had a pretty good life to date. And I was very grateful for that. So having the stroke, I don't think changed that perception in me. I'm sure it sort of sharpened it a little bit, but I was already aware of, I was pretty fortunate to have lived the life I had led up until that stage. And I was aware of that and very grateful for that. So I don't think that changed me too much. I guess it changed people around me quite a bit. The experience they had gone through, particularly my wife. She was, a pretty stressful time for her and for my parents and for friends that were with me when it happened. So I think it was stressful for them. And this is often something that stroke or any illness, the focus is on the person that it's involving. The focus is not around the support or the people that are close to that person. And often they go without help or attention or, that sort of thing. So when I was sort of helping with the Stroke Association and raising awareness and funds and all that sort of thing, I was very aware that the support crew around a stroke survivor was a very important part of that process, and they also need a lot of care and attention, because it's not an easy thing to care for somebody like me when that happens, and all the attention and all the focus is on you as opposed to everybody around you that are suffering as well in a different way. So I guess it made me a little bit more sympathetic to a lot of things, and opened my eyes to something that I didn't really know much about. And hopefully I've raised a little bit of awareness. I've helped a few people, I hope, along the way, and will continue to do so. It was 10 years ago, coming up pretty soon, and it seems a long time ago, but I don't want to go through something like that again, I tell you. But and the staff and the nurses that looked after me and in the ICU unit were unbelievable, and they do that every day. I just don't know how they get through that, but they were the real heroes in all this.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Okay, so I want to quickly talk about your sons, Nick, Tom, and Lewis. Nick's a fullback in the Harlequins Academy. Tom's following in his dad's footsteps as fly-half on the Queensland Reds in Brisbane, while Lewis is currently taking the Premiership here by storm in the UK as a winger for Harlequins, scoring not one but 2 tries in the Premiership final last year against defending champions Exeter to secure his club's first title for 9 years. They're all achieving great things at their respective clubs, with international success hopefully on the horizon. So, as their father, just how proud are you of your sons, seeing them following in your footsteps on the rugby pitch?
Amazingly, I'm proud of them, and that it's their decision with what they do. I'm more proud. Their rugby stuff is great and all that sort of thing, but I'm more proud around, and I hope it's not too much of a cliche, but the people they're becoming. The other day, I was down at Quinn's watching Lewis when they played Wasps. I was walking along the corridor there, and a lady from the catering staff at Quinn's, who look after the boys during the week with cooking their lunch and that sort of thing. And she pulled me up and just said, I just want to say to you that Lewis is such a nice boy. He's my favourite. He always comes and talks to me and always says thank you. He's such an angel. And I just thought that's the best thing that's happened to me today. And Lewis went on to score a try against Wasps, really good try, and they won the game. But I thought that, for me, that's what I'm proud of, that, there's somebody like my son that I don't tell him to do those sort of things, but he just goes and does it because of the person he is. Both Tom and Nick are similar. So they're doing great. They're really enjoying themselves, and I hope they can go as far as they can go. And that's great, but they keep enjoying it. But I'm sort of, my wife Isabella and I are just proud of the young men they're sort of turning into, and I'm also proud of them that they're not just looking at rugby. They're looking, Lewis is looking at university. I think he's enrolled to go to university in September and study, and Tom's looking at that as well. So those sort of things are important, because, as we all know, rugby is a very short-term sort of career. You've got to have other options. You can't go and sit on the beach when you turn 30, unfortunately. I know that. So they have to do something for the rest of their lives. So you've got to use this sort of time as not only enjoying themselves and being successful and sort of living up to your potential on the rugby field, but also you've got to realise what you're going to do after that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always important to look forward. Okay, so let's turn our attention to next autumn, the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Australia currently sits 6th in the world rankings, and at the time of recording, are coming off the back of a 2021 calendar year that saw them split the mid-year internationals, 2 wins, 2 losses. They fell just short of New Zealand to win the Rugby Championship and win just one of their 4 end-of-year internationals, suffering defeats to Scotland, England, and Wales in the process. But of course, the Wallabies have an incredibly prestigious history. Not only 1, but 2 Rugby World Cup wins to date, coming second in the tournament as recently as 2015. But as an Australian rugby legend yourself, what do you make of the current Wallabies side's chances at next year's tournament? And are there any exciting youngsters coming through that we should be looking out for in the green and gold?
Yeah, I think the Wallabies will be competitive next year in the World Cup in France. They had a bit of a mixed year last year. At home, they were reasonably okay, having won against France and Argentina and beating the Springboks and that sort of thing. So yet to win against the All Blacks, or yet to win. They haven't won against them for a while, but then again, not many people do.
No.
Apart from their tour over here at the end of the year. And I don't think, while the results went against both Australia and New Zealand and South Africa for that matter while they were here, and I'm not making this as an excuse, but we've got to look at the situation that they were in at that time. They were finishing up what it was a very, very long period of time in sort of an isolated bubble. A lot of them had been in a bubble since sort of May, June, which is a hell of a lot of time to be in that. And that takes its toll. And you're not only sitting in a hotel room and with the same people all the time, but you're also then going out and trying to play test match rugby as well. and all the pressures around that, and without any sort of that release. So I do think that New Zealand, Australia, South Africa and Argentina, it was a difficult time for them, and fatigue and other issues, I think, may have been a factor. I'm not taking away from the wins of the teams up here, but that was certainly a factor. So I've got my excuses out of the way for Australia's performance here. But I do think they've got some good young players. We've got some handy forwards in terms of size and capabilities and experience up front. There's a good blend of youngsters coming through. Having just seen the first 2 weeks of the Super Rugby AU down there, I'm actually quite pleased that there's a number of the teams that are giving youngsters a chance and letting them play, etc. And, the real test comes when later in the season, a few months' time, when they start playing across the Tasman against the New Zealand provinces who are obviously very strong. And that will be a pretty stern test for the Australian teams. But if we get lucky with injuries and some availability and all that sort of stuff, I think the Wallabies are building up quite nicely to make a competitive run in 2023. One hopes so.
Yeah, looking forward to watching that. Okay, so Michael, as I do with all of my guests, I'm going to end with some quick fire questions. You ready?
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Let's do it. Okay. So firstly, where do you keep your World Cup winners medal?
It was at my parents' house, but they gave it back to me. So I actually have it in a shoebox upstairs in the back of the cupboard. I do know where it is. That's the important thing. Same with my wedding ring.
Brilliant. Okay. Favorite takeaway food?
I don't know. I don't have takeaway food very often. I'm Chinese.
Chinese.
Thai. There we Thai.
Thai, yeah. Nice.
Thai curry, yeah.
Okay, I think I know this because before we started recording, I could hear them in the background, but dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's barking away upstairs. It's dinner time.
Brilliant stuff. Okay. Favorite music artist?
I have lots and lots, but I guess the last concert I saw, which was last November in Detroit, was the Rolling Stones. So over a long period of time, they're probably always in the top 5, I would say. So let's say them.
Hard to beat. Okay. Favorite sports film?
The recent one. What was the Michael Jordan one? That was
The Last Dance documentary series?
Yeah, that'll do. That was probably one of the last ones I watched.
Yeah, that was good. Okay. Your first car?
My first car was a Volkswagen Passat in 1984. And when I went away on the 84 Grand Slam tour, my mother was using it. And when I came back, she gave me a box with a steering wheel and a steering wheel cover and the seat covers and a radio in it because she blew it up. So you can guess how it was a pretty shonky old car, but she blew it up while I was away.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. I know you're a keen golfer. So what's your handicap?
At the moment, it is 10.
Nice.
It was I got down to about 7 at one stage. Then after the stroke, I didn't play for about 2 or 3 years. My sight and everything, it went right out to 18, but I managed to get it back down to around 10, but I don't play to it very often, put it that way.
Very good. Okay. Can you describe how it feels to lift the Webb Ellis Cup in one word for me?
Satisfying.
Nice. How much sweeter was it doing it after being England in their own stadium?
I often go up to the top of, I live in Richmond, and up at the top of Richmond Hill, looking out over the Petersham Meadows there, you can see Twickenham. And I often just sort of look over every now and then and think, that's a pretty good spot. I mean, it didn't really matter who we beat in the final, as long as we beat, whoever we were playing against, beat them. But it was probably all the more sweeter to do it against England at home and live about a mile from the stadium now. In fact, I was a few years ago when we first moved in Richmond here, I got into a taxi in the West End somewhere coming home after a dinner, and the taxi driver looked in the rear vision mirror and said, where to? And I said, Twickenham, thanks, mate. And he goes, where else would you be going? I'm going to the stadium, mate. I live there. We lived across the river a little bit for a while over in Twickenham. So that was always the joke whenever I got in a cab. Where else would you be going?
Brilliant stuff. Okay. The one up-and-coming Australian we should be looking out for at next autumn's World Cup.
I'd love to say Tom Lynagh, but I might say Geordie Pataya. He's sort of had a bad few years with injury, but as an athlete and as a rugby player, I think he's got a lot to offer. And if he can string some games together, get in some form, I think it could be a really good performer for Australia.
Fantastic. All eyes on him. Okay. If you could appear on any game show, what would it be?
One where I was certain to win some money. Question of sport.
Solid choice. Okay. Your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, I know. I'm not a big fan of karaoke, but the last time I was in karaoke was in Tokyo during the World Cup a couple of years ago. And the song I chose or got to sing was Pretty Vacant by the Sex Pistols.
Wow, that's a tough choice.
I think it had something to do with liking the movie Lost in Translation, because I seem to recall that at one stage in the movie when they were doing karaoke, Pretty Vacant was being sung. So I think it had something to do with that.
Nice. Okay. Would you rather score a game-winning try under the post, of course, leaving yourself an easy conversion, or hit a game-winning drop goal?
I'd probably score the try, because the idea of the game is to score tries. So that's probably it.
There we go. Okay. And finally, who is going to win the 2023 Rugby World Cup?
I'd say France at this stage. I like France.
There we go. Heard it here first. Okay, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on my show. Where can people find you on social media? Check out your book, as well as anything else you've currently got going on.
They can find me, I guess, on Twitter. I don't even know what my thing is, or on Instagram, I guess. You can find me on both of those.
There we go. I'll make sure to leave all of those links down below so people can get you.
Thank you.
Very easily. You're very welcome. Michael, once again, thank you so much and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks, Seb. You too, man. Nice to chat to you.
And there he goes, the brilliant Michael Lynagh, a truly special player on the rugby field with plenty of incredible stories to share off of it. From his trophy-laden career to his recovery from a stroke in 2012, it's no wonder why Michael serves as an inspiration to rugby fans everywhere. I'm looking forward to seeing his three sons, Nick, Tom and Lewis, continue to do the Lynagh name proud on the pitch and carry on their dad's legacy. If you'd like to keep up to date with Michael, then you can do so across his social media accounts. All the links you need are in the description of this episode. I've got many more great guests coming very soon, so stay tuned right here on Seb Talks Sports. Catch you soon, guys.